What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today, we're going to be talking our early quarterback rankings for the 2022 fantasy football season. We're going to be talking our top 12 guys. We're also going to include our tiers, so should be pretty interesting. If you guys enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. Let us hear in the comment section. Do you agree, disagree? Who should be higher? Who should be lower on this list? Along with any other questions you guys might have, we will do our best to answer them all. And lastly, make sure to get yourself a copy of the 2022 ADP Fantasy Football Draft Guide. Has rankings like these and more. Everything you can want at a great value. Top 150 overall player ranking in standard and PPR formats. Individual player bios, tiers, projections, along with general fantasy advice. Details in the description. But with that being said, let's get right into this. And as you can see, we have got our rankings here displayed nicely and tiered. And starting at the 101 spot, I mean, look, it's Josh Allen of the Buffalo Bills, 2 years in a row as the number one guy for fantasy football. And it's tough to, unseat him here because he's seemingly the best combination out of these tier one guys of passing and rushing upside. He won't necessarily get you the same amount of rushing yards as a Lamar Jackson or a Kyler Murray or a Jalen Hurts, but his rushing touchdown upside, the way he's utilized in the red zone by the Bills, we'll see if it continues this season. But the fact that he can get like 7-8 rushing touchdowns on the season, and he can still also get you above 400 yards on the ground, maybe even above 500 yards on the ground, and then still good for over 4,000 yards passing with high touchdown upside through the air with weapons like a Stephon Diggs still there, guys like a Jamison Crowder, potentially an improving Gabriel Davis. So a lot to like offensively for the Bills and for Josh Allen. Seemingly there's no reason why after these last two stellar years, all of a sudden he should, fall off the face of the earth. He's typically the first quarterback drafted in the majority of drafts that I've seen, regardless of the format, size, or really, anything else. Typically, it's towards the end of the second round, early third round. Now, my philosophy is always, you wait on the quarterback position. It's such a deep position that you can get much better value later on. But regardless here, we're specifically talking quarterbacks and where Josh Allen fits on this list. And in my opinion, he is the number one guy. The thing that I would point out is there's typically, a gap between the next quarterback selected. But in my opinion, all of these guys, these top five guys that I have as tier one quarterbacks, I don't think the, drop off is all that much, which again is why I always advise taking it back to a drafting philosophy to wait on the quarterback run to, if you're deciding to go with a tier one guy, instead of getting a Josh Allen, wait like 4 more rounds and get a Kyler Murray. But we'll touch on that later. But at the end of the day, you can't hate on Josh Allen. I do think he is the number one guy. And afterwards, from 2 to 5, you can have a conversation. Honestly, I think order it any which way you want. I'm going to, give you my 2 cents why I think it should be Lamar Jackson at the number 2 spot of the Baltimore Ravens. Look, last season, he was hurt for the majority of the year, banged up. And yes, he did lose Marquise Brown this offseason, traded to the Arizona Cardinals. That is, arguably a big loss, but he still got Mark Andrews there. He still got a guy that I really liked at wide receiver coming out of, the 2021 draft in Rashad Bateman. I think he's going to have a big season and step up in a big way. So, honestly, I don't think it's going to be too much more different than Marquise Brown into Mark Andrews. Offensively, the Baltimore Ravens are a solid team. You can kind of rely on them to get it done there to, as long as Lamar Jackson's the quarterback, to avoid those offensive lulls. You're going to see that as kind of a trend in all these top 5 quarterbacks, top 6 quarterbacks. They all have elite offenses, so they're not, going to struggle putting up double-digit points offensively. And with Lamar Jackson, though, the biggest thing is obviously the rushing upside. I think he's probably the favorite in terms of leading the league in rushing yards for the quarterback position. If not him, then Jalen Hurts. But if you're comparing Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson, I think Jackson is on the better offense. I think he's the better passer of the football. And, I mean, he's actually done what everyone is hyping up Jalen Hurts to potentially maybe be able to do, and that's be an MVP quarterback in this league. I think he just, unfortunately, got in the short end of the stick, injured last year, and then the expectations the year prior were just sky high. He wasn't going to duplicate it, but he still has the 1,000 plus yard rushing upside. In my opinion, he's for sure going to be, one of the leaders for the Ravens in terms of rushing yards. Like, it's either going to be him or J.K. Dobbins, and Dobbins is coming off a serious injury. There's also Gus Edwards there, but Lamar Jackson is still going to tuck it and run. And I do like this Baltimore offense. Ultimately, for fantasy football, rushing quarterbacks make a difference. And for that reason, I do have Lamar Jackson slightly higher. But again, it's nitpicking. It's a very close situation to these high-octane passers like a Patrick Mahomes, like a Justin Herbert. So for that reason, he does come in at that number 2 spot. Again, if you're in a quarterback scoring league where rushing doesn't count as much for some reason as a quarterback, then obviously Lamar Jackson would be lower. Next up, we have Patrick Mahomes. I have him at the number 3 spot. But again, all these next couple of guys, I want to continue to stress this. I'm saying, yeah, they're 3rd, they're 4th, they're 5th, but they can absolutely be, the number 2 guy or the number 3 guy. It's so close. I think, honestly, you can rearrange them anyway. Patrick Mahomes comes in here at number 3. I don't have him at the number 1 spot. He did lose Tyreek Hill, and I don't think he quite has that rushing combination of a Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson. He's typically going as the 2nd quarterback or the 3rd quarterback off in drafts after a Josh Allen or after a Justin Herbert. So, right around this range in probably the 3rd, 4th round. But look, even though the Chiefs are without Tyreek Hill, they're still in a high-octane offense. Mahomes still has Travis Kelce, who I would argue is, been the number 1 target for him. In terms of other weapons, Juju Smith-Schuster being added, yes, he's no Tyreek Hill, but we've seen what Juju Smith can do when he has a legitimate number 1 opposite him, like back in the days of Antonio Brown with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I do think that Ben Roethlisberger, compared to Patrick Mahomes, well, Patrick Mahomes gets the edge even when, Juju Smith-Schuster was putting up those big numbers opposite AB in Pittsburgh. Then you've also added some talent in the draft, guys like a Sky Moore. I don't think that Mecole Hardman is necessarily going to take that next big step this year. I mean, if he hadn't done it before, I don't think there's really any reason to think that all of a sudden now is going to be the magical year. To me, it's Kelce, it's Juju Smith, maybe Sky Moore, but I do think Patrick Mahomes makes a lot of those guys, and offensively, I don't think this team is going to break without Tyreek Hill all of a sudden. So I still have faith in Patrick Mahomes. He's going to be one of the favorites to lead the league in passing yards and passing touchdowns. So for that reason, he comes in at this number 3 spot for me. Next up, we have got Justin Herbert. He was a rookie sensation. His sophomore year, he was sensational. I was pounding the drum for Justin Herbert last season. I was like, he's a guy in the 8th, 9th, 10th round that you should be taking a chance on. He has everything you could want offensively. That continues to be the case. Look, that offensive line is stellar, one of the best in the NFL. They continue to add to it to fortify it. Offensively, are you kidding me? You've still got Keenan Allen. You've got Mike Williams, who finally broke out last season. You added Gerald Everett as a tight end that I think is a sneaky, nice addition. And then at running back, you've got Austin Eckler. You added Isaiah Spiller as a backup. I really, really like that situation. You've got a solid defense. And even though, the Chargers find ways to lose those football games, Herbert finds ways to put up fantasy numbers. And I think it's going to be the exact same situation in this season, comparing it to last. So I really like Herbert once again. The difference is, this time the cat's out of the bag. You're going to have to pay up big time to get him. In fact, a lot of times he's going off in drafts as the number 2 quarterback, so keep that in mind. And then finally, here, the last quarterback in our Tier 1 group is Kyler Murray of the Arizona Cardinals. I think Kyler Murray is kind of a victim of recency bias. He burned a lot of people last season, but I do want to remind people, prior to his injury in 2021, he was like an MVP consideration. He was doing amazing on the field, and then also for fantasy purposes. He was a guy that was carrying your teams. You saw that high rushing upside. You saw what he could do with his arm. I think, he's one of the better passers in terms of rushing quarterbacks, high-end rushing quarterbacks. Like, I take him above Lamar Jackson passing the football. I take him above Jalen Hurts passing the football, just, to name a couple. And yes, DeAndre Hopkins is suspended for the first 6 games, but you added Marquise Brown. You have Zach Ertz, who I think is going to be a viable option. James Conner there is going to help you out in the rushing department. The offensive line still has question marks, but this is an offense that's going to be, scoring a lot of points. Like, that's their MO. Defensively, they have question marks, so they have to air out the football. That's a good thing for Kyler Murray here. And the fact that you can get him in like the 5th, 6th round, to me, he's the guy that I continuously target out of all of these quarterbacks in the tier 1 category. A lot of people probably remember him being injured, and then when he did return, not being 100% and just being burned by him. I will take advantage of that. Healthy for the 2022 season, he is one of my favorite, if you will, bounce back candidates, if you can even call him that. But yeah, getting a tier 1 quarterback like in the 5th, 6th round, that's an absolute slam dunk. So I really, really like Kyler Murray out of this group. Next, going to our tier 2 quarterbacks, we start with Matthew Stafford at the number 6 spot. I think you can have, honestly, like, copy and paste the season he had last year to the season this year, and I don't think that's anything all that crazy. Like, okay, Cooper Kupp probably won't be the Triple Crown winner again, but, offensively, you added Allen Robinson, who I think is probably, an upgrade over Robert Woods, over Odell Beckham last season. You've got a good weapon in Van Jefferson that can stretch the field. Rushing wise, you've got Cam Akers, you've got Darrell Henderson. I like that duo. The offensive line did lose some pieces, but I don't think it's going to all of a sudden just fall apart. Matthew Stafford is somebody that you can get like in the 8th, 9th, 10th round. It's like people are forgetting the fact that he was almost a top 5 quarterback last season, and he was a guy that he was very, very clutch. Like, 2021 happened, folks. Again, it's crazy, but I feel like people are still thinking of, it's Matthew Stafford. He inherited a really good team. He shouldn't get as much credit. Oh, it's Matthew Stafford from the Detroit Lions. He shouldn't get as much credit. Matthew Stafford is a baller. The guy's a Hall of Fame quarterback, and the guy is very fantasy viable. I still really like him, and I don't think he should be docked in rankings all that much. I think doing what he did last year, this year again, is 1,000% on the table. So take advantage of that. Then, probably the biggest surprise here, Derek Carr of the Raiders at my number 7 spot. I've been on the record saying that I think this is the breakout season for Derek Carr. I said it last year for guys like Justin Herbert, for Matthew Stafford. I'm putting it on Derek Carr. A lot of pressure, but look, he has got the weapons. Like, last year, he almost went for 5,000 yards when there were so many injuries on that offense in terms of pass catchers. Like, Darren Waller got hurt. At wide receiver, it was pretty much just Hunter Renfrow. Now you have a healthy Darren Waller returning, who, when healthy, he's a top 5 tight end in the NFL. You've got Devontae Adams, a top 3 wide receiver in the NFL that you just traded for. And I think Derek Carr is going to be able to take advantage of that. You've still got Hunter Renfrow, so him opposite Waller and Adams is going to create so many mismatches. And you've got a good offensive line. You've still got Josh Jacobs. I really like the upside for Derek Carr this season in terms of passing yards. I think he could sneakily be in the top 3 in terms of passing yards, in terms of passing touchdowns. Obviously, the rushing upside isn't there, but it doesn't have to be. Like, Patrick Mahomes is still a tier 1 quarterback. I think people are going to be very pleasantly surprised by Derek Carr. If you don't want to invest in him as your top quarterback, I beg you to take a chance on him as your backup quarterback, because a lot of people have him ranked outside of the top 10 quarterbacks. He's going to be drafted as a backup. He's going to be drafted probably after the first 8, 9, maybe even 10 rounds in drafts. Take advantage of that. Derek Carr, I think, can absolutely be your starting quarterback for the entirety of the season. And then if you, for some reason, drafted somebody else that's higher on your rankings, and then you find yourself in the double-digit rounds where Derek Carr is still somehow available, take a chance on him. He is going to pay off all the pieces that are needed for him to be successful are there. He's in a division that's going to go bonkers offensively, playing with Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, and Russell Wilson. It's all you could ask for. I love Derek Carr in 2022. Next up, we go to Joe Burrow of the Cincinnati Bengals. He's an interesting guy here. I love the offense that Joe Burrow has around him. The offensive line also did improve a little bit. You've got a good rushing attack with Joe Mixon. I'm a little bit scared if we're going to see maybe a little bit of a Super Bowl hangover, but you can't really predict that in terms of stats, things like that. Just something that happens. But if we ignore that, like, you've got Jamar Chase, you've got T. Higgins, you've got Tyler Boyd. That's a scary good trifecta. Joe Burrow also another year removed from his injury. It could be a reason why it took the Bengals and Joe Burrow specifically a little bit longer to get it going, but towards the end of the season, obviously through their Super Bowl run, Joe Burrow was sensational. So we'll see if we can see that for the majority of this season, but he definitely is another one of these quarterbacks that can be in the conversation for top 5, top 3 in terms of leading the league in passing yards. Next up, we get a Jalen Hurts, our last tier 2 quarterback. He comes at the number 9 spot. Hurts of the Eagles. And honestly, like, part of me wants to have Hurts outside of the top 10, but the rushing upside is probably going to save him just because it's so stupidly weighed for fantasy scoring purposes if you are a high-end rushing quarterback, and that's what's going to save him. But the reason I say that, I want to rank him outside our top 10 quarterbacks, like, you look at what Jalen Hurts did last year, I believe he finished right at the number 9 spot. We had him ranked at that spot. This year, a lot of people have him ranked as a top 3 quarterback, which I think is absolutely insane. I think it's lazy just to say, oh, he's going to be the next Lamar Jackson. He has that huge rushing upside. The guy barely passed for 3,000 yards last season. He was very inconsistent with his rushing, with his passing, with everything. Like, okay, at the end of the day, he was a nice find and all of that, but he was so up and down. The Eagles' offense, I still don't believe it. Okay, everyone's going to say they added A.J. Brown, like, oh, Jalen Hurts' best friend. I don't give a damn if it's Jalen Hurts' cousin. Like, the quarterback needs to be capable of passing the football for that to mean something. And I don't believe in Hurts as a passer. Like, where would you rank Jalen Hurts as a fantasy quarterback if it wasn't for his rushing upside? Like, if he wasn't getting you almost 1,000 yards on the ground, he'd be outside of the top 15. Let's be honest with that. And sure, you've got A.J. Brown, you've got Devonta Smith, you've got Dallas Goedert, but I don't think Jalen Hurts is capable of taking advantage of that week in and week out, but he will be saved by the rushing upside. I just think he's going to be a lot more inconsistent than people think. Honestly, I think what we saw last year with a little bit of an improvement because he's got some more legitimate weapons now is what you should expect. I don't think he's going to be a top 3 quarterback. To me, that's absolutely ludicrous, and he's a guy that I think is being overvalued right now. Now, moving on to our number 10 guy into our tier 3 list, we start with Tom Brady of the Bucs. Honestly, if you want to make the argument that Brady should be higher, I don't fault you. I'm going to go back into these rankings and potentially do so and, move him up. But I am a little bit scared right now with the situation in Tampa Bay. All these top-notch weapons going down. Like with Chris Godwin, if the Bucs say Chris Godwin is going to be available week 1, then Tom Brady's going to go up these rankings. But if they say, like a lot of the rumors right now, that he's going to start off on PUP, that's, of concern. Rob Gronkowski retiring, he's a viable weapon. Like, he's a mismatch. That's of concern. Russell Gage, he's going to be a good value for fantasy, but it's, there's a drop-off between Chris Godwin and Russell Gage, and then when you ask Russell Gage to be your number 2, yes, you've still got Mike Evans, you've got Leonard Fournette, but I don't think Brady is going to duplicate the type of season he had last year. The offensive line also took a little bit of a step back. Like, I'm not really weighing the fact that he retired and then came back, went back on that decision against him. I don't think that's going to mean all too much. Sure, the Bucs will still be a playoff team, but I am a little bit hesitant. Once we get closer to the season and we get some more clarity on that injury to Chris Godwin, then we can talk about moving Brady up these rankings. Next up, we've got Russell Wilson of now the Denver Broncos. one of my favorite, potential flyers. He's going around this range, I'd say probably between the ninth to 11th quarterback off the board. But he's got huge upside now in Denver. Because we've seen it before with him, like in Seattle. This is a pretty similar type of situation. You've got your Lockett and Metcalf versions in Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton. You even got more depth. You got a Tim Patrick. You're spoiled at the running back position with Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon. You've got a good offensive line. You've got a good defense. And, I think it could be those reasons why a lot of those cold streaks that we saw with Russell Wilson after he was absolutely insane could be avoided and could make him like a top 5 potential quarterback. Out of all these tier 3 quarterbacks that we're going to talk, Russell Wilson by far has the highest upside, and I'd say he actually has a pretty decent high floor. I wouldn't be shocked if he moves up my rankings closer to September when it's all said and done. And similar to like a Derek Carr, I really like his upside. He plays in a division that's going to be very high scoring, so another thing going for him. I really like Russell Wilson as a value pick this year in fantasy. And then finally, we've got Dak Prescott of the Dallas Cowboys at the number 12 spot. Offensively, yes, the Cowboys lost Amari Cooper, but they've still got CeeDee Lamb. We'll see what happens with Michael Gallup coming back from his injury. But you've got Dalton Schultz, you've got Ezekiel Elliott, you've got Tony Pollard, you've still got a good offensive line. So I like Dak Prescott. He was another guy that was kind of inconsistent last season, but another year removed. Again, saying this for a quarterback about a serious knee injury. So I think that's also going to help. I like Dak Prescott. I think he can be a quarterback one for you, but it's offensively, we just need more consistency from this team. I do think it's going to be a little bit better this year, but, I look at the names ahead of him, and I'm hard-pressed to say, like, okay, he's for sure going to be better. I can, maybe say, okay, he'll be better than, like, potentially Tom Brady, potentially, Joe Burrow. I'm personally really high on Derek Carr, so I'm not going to say Derek Carr, but a lot of other people will, so he can kind of make his way into the top 10, but I think it's going to be closer to the outside of the top 10 than, like 6th or 7th overall. So for that reason, I have Dak Prescott here. He's still talented. He still has the upside, but I am worried about some inconsistencies. But with that, we wrap up this breakdown of our top 12 quarterbacks of these early quarterback rankings for 2022. In this fantasy football season. As always, let us hear it in the comment section. Do you agree, disagree? Who's too high? Who's too low? Who else should be on this list? Along with any other questions you guys might have, we will do our best to answer them all. If you enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe. Check out the 2022 ADP Fantasy Football Draft Guide. Everything you want at a great value. Details in the description. But in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.